Live from the 607 is the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour Entertainment Edition, where we're talking comics, we're talking movies, we're talking TV, we're talking a lot more. So why don't you join in the conversation? Because here we go. And welcome back to another edition of the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour Entertainment Edition. I am your host, Ken M., and in our brand new studio, it's the one and only intern himself, Padawan J.
Hello, hello, hello.
And our comics blog head writer himself, the Bright Guy Signal.
What up, people?
Folks, this is kind of a big episode. We have one topic and one topic only to discuss, and that is Star Wars.
Oh, baby.
Kind of a big movie coming out this weekend, gentlemen.
You might have heard of it.
I think so. The Last Jedi is hitting your theaters this weekend, and we decided to dedicate the whole episode talking a little Star Wars with you. Make sure to hit us up on the hashtag ODPHEE and join in the conversation as well. So what we figured we'd do is break down Star Wars to us. Like, how did we get into it? I know for myself, I kind of grew up with the movies. And when I mean grew up with the movies, I mean 4, 5, 6, not that stuff that we call 1, 2, and 3. I know Pat is getting fuming when I say that because I am not the biggest fan of the quote-unquote original 3. I will take New Hope, Empire, and Jedi all day, every day. Empire Strikes Back is one of the greatest films of all time. Boba Fett all day. I could just rant and rave about that, but I'm going to hand it over, Pat, because as your nickname goes, you are probably the head Star Wars aficionado of the panel today.
I would agree with that.
Break it down to us. How'd you get into Star Wars, man?
Well, the reason we bring this up is I've had it said to me, and I kind of agree with this. I've heard it over the years. Everyone has a different story on how they got into Star Wars. No two stories are ever the same. You know, so how I got into it was I was born in 1989, so I was kind of in between the original movies and then the 1, 2, and 3. So I originally saw it when the 4, 5, and 6 got re-released in theaters in the mid to late 90s. What was happening was, of course, Sesame Street Live was coming to the area, as they do every year in our area. And my parents were talking, and my dad said to my mom, he's getting a little old to go see Sesame Street Live. Why don't I go take him to see Star Wars? Because my dad had seen Star Wars when it came out back in 1977. Why don't I take him to see Star Wars? This is something he might like. So my brother and sister went to Sesame Street Live. They were still young. And my dad and I went to go see Star Wars A New Hope at the theater over in Vestal. And went to see it. Wasn't really that many people from what I remember. I want to say there was maybe 5 people counting my dad and myself. So light crowd. Going to watch a movie. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know anything about it. I'd never heard of it. My dad really didn't tell me anything about it going into it. So I kind of went in as dry and unexpected as you can get, not knowing a thing.
Fair enough.
And went through it. And I think the moment that easily had me hooked was when they got to the cantina and the 2 guys try picking a fight with Luke, and the one guy gets his arm cut off.
Classic scene.
And there's blood everywhere. And me as like an 8, 9, 10-year-old kid who, at that age, what kid doesn't love gore and violence? I yelled in the middle of a theater full of 5 people, "Cool," and was hooked from there on.
Well, you got that awesome cantina music going in the background.
Oh, of course.
Going down.
Well, yeah, because as most cartoons, I guess at that time, is you kind of deal with kind of like the space age, action adventure, not so much the gore and violence, I guess, aspect of it, but I think the more action adventure, and you're kind of like, whoa, what's going on, and the wonderment of it, because it's truly an imaginative process.
Oh yeah,
to come up with the entire idea of Star Wars. I mean, basically, it's just the concept of good versus evil, but you're amplifying it to, alien races.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the classic good versus evil story, but it's also the hero's journey.
Absolutely,
it's the hero's journey. I mean, from there, my dad that Christmas got the VHS special edition for Christmas, and I, the next day on Christmas, he got it on Christmas Eve at my grandparents' house. The following day, we opened gifts. We did the whole Christmas thing, and my brother and I went and we watched Empire, and we watched Jedi that same day. So with it, we went and watched them, And it sort of turned into a thing. I don't even know how this became a thing, but it became a thing for him and I that whenever one of us was homesick from school, for whatever reason, whatever it was, you would watch Empire Strikes Back.
Interesting.
Like, we wouldn't have watched A New Hope recently or watched any. So it just became a thing that we were homesick from school. You're watching Empire.
See, that was the funny thing. My brother and I, when it came to watching Star Wars, we always argued, are we going to watch Empire or are we going to watch Return of the Jedi? I always wanted Empire. He always wanted Return of the Jedi. And usually my dad would just be like, okay, you guys haven't seen New Hope in a while. Start with that. Then you watch Empire, and then you watch Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting because I would figure if you're going to really get into something, you're going to start with A New Hope. I mean, for me, that's how I got into it. And I will say I've probably seen New Hope more than any of the other Star Wars movies.
Instead of quote Tracy Morgan, you've seen Star Wars 500 times.
Probably. I will say the original Star Wars, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of grew up watching that myself. And I always got hooked into that, and Empire just blew me away.
Oh, yeah. It's easily probably the best sequel movie ever made.
Because the reason for that is it's what a lot of sequels today don't do. It took the Star Wars universe, which everyone loved New Hope when it came out. It broke box office records, and it was the highest grossing movie to date. It beat Jaws at the box office. And then 3 years later, when Empire came out, not only did you get to go back to that galaxy that you loved in 1977, not 97, it took that universe and it built upon it. That's what makes it a better sequel than a lot of sequels today. Is a lot of sequels will just rehash what the first one did or not really build upon the world the first one set up. Empire built on it. It was like, okay, yeah, you remember all those planets you saw in the first one? Well, we're not going to revisit any of them. We're going to go to completely new planets.
Yeah, if you go, you got time before Last Jedi comes out. Go pop in whatever version of A New Hope you have. Watch A New Hope. That movie ends. That movie can end and there not be another sequel.
No,
that is a beginning, middle, and end of the story. Good guys win. Bad guys are off tumbling through space. Happy at the end. There doesn't have to be a sequel.
No, you almost wonder if they wrote it without the idea of doing a trilogy.
I think they might have written it because I know they had contracts for all three movies. Like Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher had contracts to do sequels. I think they wrote it because nothing for that movie went right in the making of it.
Oh,
like
God,
if you look into it, nothing was working.
No.
And even Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford, they didn't take the movie seriously when they were on set. The only time they were serious was if Alec Guinness walked on and they're like, okay, guys, we got to get our crap together. This is Alec Guinness. I think the reason they just ended it like that for New Hope is I don't think they were going to expect it to do good at the box office. So, like, why set up sequels?
Well, they ran out of budget. Like, if you want to get into filmmaking and are really interested in the making of a film, find a book about the making of Star Wars: A New Hope, because I've read in a couple of different places the process of making this film legitimately almost killed George Lucas.
And that's just kind of crazy to think about. I mean, just of how endearing of a overwhelming of a project rather.
Yeah, the crazy thing is I remember I think I was watching a documentary at one time where George was more than halfway through the editing process of editing A New Hope. They were maxed out on the budget of the film. They were maxed out on everything. He was having to borrow money left, right, and center. And he didn't like the edit he was doing. He scrapped the entire edit and started from square one.
And that's just crazy to think of.
That in large part of the stress and just everything with making A New Hope is why he didn't direct the following two movies.
Well, that would make sense. I mean, for anybody that's really passionate about a project and to come up with the idea and the concept and what you're really putting your heart and soul in, it's going to wear on you. There's no question of that.
Oh, yeah.
And I think for him, it's just to see how serious he is. Because, I mean, it's almost you want to say it's like a different kind of filmmaking time period.
Yeah.
In comparison to, different eras if you want to go through. And I think in that one, you were kind of in the saga mode. And I think for him he wanted to really knock it out of the park the first shot. And I think to be a perfectionist about it, yeah, they'll wear on you. And then you could definitely tell in that.
Plus, everything he was doing with that in terms of special effects for A New Hope was experimental at the time, and he wasn't really a known person. No one really knew who George Lucas was. So for most of Hollywood, he was just this random guy who's trying to do this absurd project. So everyone's like, all right, this isn't going to work. Even the studio, Fox, was like, all right, we'll help distribute the movie, but they didn't market on anything for that movie. So they really lost out when Star Wars took off and all like the toys and everything came out.
Yeah, you can go back and look at the trailer on YouTube for the original Star Wars and just how I almost want to say hokey it is.
Yeah, it looks
Because-
pretty
Well,
stupid.
it's for that time period.
For-
You
for
got to
that-
remember because
even
you
for
look
that
at
time
now,
period.
you see.
Oh, well, if you're comparing it to now, yes, but even for that time period, it is very it looks like they just took the raw cut of the film and then just put voiceover and music to it.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure you could go on YouTube and you can
It's
type
on
New
there.
Hope modern day trailer, and I'm sure people have probably re-edited the trailer of what it would look like if it aired in theaters or on YouTube today. But
Yeah.
it's like the original 1977 one was like, oh my gosh, I'm amazed anyone went to see this movie.
Yeah.
Well, I think it just sticks out to the test of time. I mean, like I said, I kind of grew up at the back end of it, where the movies were just wrapping up, and just seeing them and just how it resonates and just the effect it had on people, I think is just, it really touched a nerve. And it's truly an epic adventure when you break it down to the story of a hero coming of age and, good versus evil, like we've already said. And it's just really telling of how detailed in story it is.
I was
Yeah.
going to say, everyone always says in New Hope, Luke was a whiny kid. And it's like, well, if you look at where he's the example of a hero's journey, look at where he starts out in New Hope. He's just like, well, I was going to go into Tashi Station and pick up some power converters. And then you see him in Return of the Jedi a few years later, and he's just like, I'm here to get my buddy Han Solo out of Carbonite Jabba. So we can either do this nicely or we can do this the hard way. That's an idea of a character arc, is you take them at one point, so by the time that they reach the end of the story, they're a completely different person. Stuff has changed them. They've experienced stuff, so they're not the same person anymore. And Star Wars does a very good job with that.
Yeah, I mean, he's roughly 18 years old in A New Hope, and he's doing what any other kid at 18 years old wants to do. He wants to get out of his parents' house. Well, in this case, his aunt and uncle's.
Yeah, it's a very kind of sign of the times, so to speak, but with a little sci-fi edge to it.
Oh, yeah.
Mark Hamill has even said, people are like, oh, are we going to get a Luke origin story? And he's like, why would you want to see that? It's Luke Skywalker sitting on a moisture farm for years of his life. That's not exactly an entertaining movie.
Yeah, there's no kind of quote-unquote Smallville backstory to it. No, it's when it happens, and it kind of goes from there.
Yeah, I will say, though, it's like, as you guys have been talking about how you experienced Star Wars, I definitely was the right age for the prequel trilogy. I grew up, I can always remember watching Star Wars, which kind of sucks when you get to 5, because I've always grown up knowing that one thing that happens in episode 5, and I would have liked to have experienced that when I was a little older, and I could have appreciated it a lot more.
Well, for the time, because you didn't have the internet and you didn't have spoilers getting leaked out left and right. I mean, that was a truly...
Well, funny you should mention that. The cast of Last Jedi was on Jimmy Kimmel last week, and Jimmy was bringing up the big plot reveal from Empire Strikes Back, which, okay, don't even have to say spoilers, because if you don't know it at this point, you're living under a rock.
Okay, I was trying to be nice and not say it.
Vader is Luke's father.
What?
Thanks for ruining it. No.
Jimmy brings it up with Mark, and Mark told this great story that I don't think I'd ever heard before. They were filming that day at the studios over in London, and the director, Irvin Kershner, said, hey, we're going to film a scene, we're going to be done for the day, but Mark, I need you to stay back for a minute. So they were going to film a scene. It wasn't anything to do with that scene. And the director tells him, all right, here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you something. It's the biggest secret of this movie. Only you, myself, and George know the secret, so that if the press finds out about this, we'll know who told.
Very good call in that one.
So they tell him Darth Vader's Luke's father. We're going to film it differently, and James Earl Jones is going to dub it over. When they film the scene, Dave Prowse in the Vader costume says, Obi-Wan killed your father. So that's what the entire cast, minus the director, Luke, and George knew. But Dave Prowse in the costume in filming says, Obi-Wan killed your father. They go back and dub it over. They get to the premiere. So before this, down the road from the studio was a pub, and all the magazines and newspapers like to send reporters out there because they knew it was being filmed there. Because by this point, it was a phenomenon. It was huge. And they were sitting there, you got the latest Star Wars rumors. What were they filming today? And so the next day in the papers, it reads on the front page in this little blurb, Obi-Wan big villain in Star Wars 2. Because by this point it didn't have a title, and Mark is like, yes, they didn't get the right info. They get to the premiere. It still hasn't gotten out. Mark is sitting in the theater at the premiere watching the movie. Harrison Ford is sitting right in front of him. And they get to that moment, no, I am your father. Mark says, Harrison Ford turned around and looked at him and goes, "You didn't tell me that, kid."
Okay, and I also want to say one part about that scene that makes it awesome, and this goes for the entire trilogy and even the prequel trilogy. Say what you like about it. We'll get to that later. When he says that line, "I am your father," you just hear John Williams' score go dun 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 dun. Like the Imperial March for that music, the entire music that John Williams made for that movie added something to it, and that's what makes that also another great aspect is in any movie, if you have a good score going with it, that's what will affect how the movie turns out. And John Williams is one of the most talented score composers today. I mean, he has the most Oscar nominations of anybody. I don't care if you're an actor or whatnot. He has, I think last I saw was like 75?
Somewhere in that neighborhood, yeah.
Like, he is up there. And it's like Star Wars is one of his best works, in my opinion.
It's definitely one that stands the test of time. We're going to take a quick break because, hey, we've just gone into the history of Star Wars to us. Let us know what you think on the hashtag ODPHEE. We're going to take you out to the sounds of Crimson Brethren. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Mike C. from I Am Horror. You're listening to the ODPH, the most killer podcast on the planet.
And we're back for our second segment of our Star Wars edition of the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour Entertainment Edition. So when Star Wars comes out, it is always an event. I would say it is definitely not a casual, hey, what just happens to be in the movie theaters this weekend?
Oh, no, definitely not.
When Star Wars comes out, you know it's coming. It is a media circus, as it rightfully should be. And obviously, when it comes out, it is one of the hottest tickets to grab wherever you are to watch it. Yeah. Pad, you got a good story about it. Why don't you break it down for the ticket sales to our listeners?
Yeah, so we have a group that goes to see all the movies, as I'm sure the listeners know. And when The Force Awakens was coming out, it was a very hot ticket, and we knew this going into it. So what happened was the trailer got dropped on Monday Night Football in October, November. I forget the exact date when. And basically they said, all right, trailer's going to be on during halftime of Monday Night Football, and tickets are going to be on sale online immediately after, like, the moment the trailer is over.
I remember that. It was a Eagles game, actually, and I remember my mom walking in. She's like, why are you watching an Eagles game? And I'm like, the Star Wars trailer is dropping at halftime. I'm not missing it.
Yeah, it was the funniest and most frustrating night for me because I have a lot of friends online who are Star Wars fans, and a lot of them aren't sports fans or football fans. So it was the funniest thing watching them have to sit through and wait for halftime of a football game. But that's besides the point. So the trailer drops. A couple of us start going to sites trying to get tickets, and the site keeps crashing.
Yeah, it was so much of a volume that it was a difficult time no matter what service you were trying to go get tickets for because it is an event, as we said. When Star Wars comes out, it is one of those movies that just it literally just takes over these social media areas of accounts that you watch. I mean, I'm trying to find a good way to word it just other than saying it's epic.
Okay, here's a way to put it in terms of how big The Force Awakens was. Jurassic World had come out that same year, and everyone was like amazed that Jurassic World had made the most money, was the fastest to reach $1 billion, and then Star Wars came out and it beat a record that was just established that year.
And that's just a true testament to the franchise and the fan base. I mean, we can all attest that as we go to New York Comic Con every year, shout out to New York Comic Con staff, it is always cosplay going on. The panels are always packed.
Oh, yeah.
It's never a quiet thing when Star Wars is in a discussion.
I mean, here's the thing you got to look at, especially with Force Awakens when it came out. Star Wars has reached several generations. You had the first generation, like my dad, for example, was the first generation to experience Star Wars. He grew up with the original trilogy. I was born in 95. I was the right age to grow up with the prequels. Say what you will about them, but I grew up with them. Then you have The Force Awakens comes out 10 years later. You have a third generation. You have like 3 generations going to see this movie. You had grandparents with their children and their grandchildren. It's like, it was massive. It just touched so many people that they're like, okay, this is coming back. Let's make it a family thing. We're all going to watch this.
And that's a true testament to the franchise and to the storytelling. Now, say what you will about the episodes 1, 2, and 3. I could say a lot. I'd rather not. They're not my cup of java.
I can say a lot about 2 and some of 1.
Yeah.
3, I will just say, I feel like that is the most liked of the prequels.
I will agree too. I will say 3 is. But to stand the test of time with other movie franchises, Star Wars has carved its own niche.
Oh, yeah, easily.
In box office history, Hollywood history, it just has a resonating effect. And like you were saying, Bri, this is going over generations. I mean, from the late 70s, early 80s.
It just hit 40 years. And you got to think, 40 years from now, we have a new trilogy. It's not like the Marvel movies where there's been 2 every year since, say, for example, okay, there was 2 Star Wars movies every year since 77. That's not the case. It was 77, 1980, and then 1983. Then Phantom Menace came out in 1999. 2002 was Attack of the Clones. 2005 was Revenge of the Sith. Then in 2015, 10 years later, we got a new one. These things have been spaced out. They're not just like one right after the other.
Well, I think because if you want to break it down that way, I don't think that it was ever expected to come out in an order like how in comparison to Marvel, where Marvel is mapped out for the next 5 years at least with all their projects coming out. Star Wars, I don't really think they had a plan for it. I mean, I honestly think they were going to do episodes 4, 5, and 6. And they did, and then they got the itch to go back and try doing 1, 2, and 3.
Well, there's talk. I mean, I've read a couple places and heard a couple stories that when they were filming the original Star Wars, George said something to Mark about coming back in whatever year it was. I forget the exact year to doing another one.
I was going to say, I think I know what you're talking about because Hamill has said before, well, then we're going to go back 20 years to tell Darth Vader's story.
I mean, this is something Hamill has said a couple of times. I don't know if it's true or not, but I mean, it's something that's been said.
I mean, Lucas likes to say he's had all the 6 movies planned out, but there are times I wonder, okay, did you have these planned out as detailed as you think?
Yeah, that's a debatable question. I mean, I think you talk to any Star Wars fan, you're going to have one side of the fence that says yes and the other says no way. I know where I stand on that because, like I said, for me personally, I did not connect as much with episodes 1, 2, and 3 as much as I did 4, 5, and 6. I absolutely love 7, even though the only thing I felt was it was kind of a mirror image to A New Hope.
And there is a reasoning for this, and you got to look at it from a storytelling aspect, and it comes down to, like you said, Ken, you weren't a huge fan of the prequels, and you're not alone with that. You can just go on the internet and read articles of how awful the prequels were for some people.
There's a large and vocal contingent.
Uh-huh.
Here's the thing you got to look at. The prequels tried to do something different with the Star Wars universe, and it didn't pan out. I know there are some fans of those movies, but overall, it didn't pan out for everybody. So what they had to do when Force Awakens came out, they had to give people something that they know the audience liked. So they went back to the original formula for New Hope, something that everybody likes universally.
Yeah, because you're going to get the diehards in and the people who love Star Wars in, no problem. But for the people who've seen the movies, they enjoy the movies. They're sitting there going, really? You're doing another one after how well the last ones did? Really?
Well, I think that they didn't want to go out on a bad note because, I mean, like I said, we have gone over this in debate numerous times on air and off, that how episode 3 ended did not exactly, I guess, satisfy all the fan base.
No.
I mean, I think it's a debatable argument.
Oh, it is, and I think part of the issue with that is their hands were kind of tied storytelling-wise, which, okay, yeah, in the in-between, in the middle, you've got some stuff to work with, but at the end of the day, when you have to get to a certain point and certain things to happen, your hands are kind of tied.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the one thing, it's always a difficult thing when you try doing a prequel and you try going back and recreating the magic, so to speak, with a story that's already been told.
That's why I personally feel like Rogue One was a good prequel.
Rogue One served its purpose.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean,
it wasn't trying to set up the whole the original trilogy. It was just trying to set up New Hope.
No, and that's all it needed to do. And I love that it was a standalone, and it did not tie back into the original 3, or the storyline original 3, rather.
Yeah.
And I love that it was just its own way. And I think for them doing a franchise with that in comparison to other franchises, I think that they took a unique turn with it that I think not too many other franchises have gone with that for movies.
No.
It's usually pretty straightforward. I mean, sometimes they'll go back and rehash old sequel ideas, it's obviously spacing out by a few years. But this one is kind of how it jumps around. It's not so much that it's a time jump you can't follow, but I think it's very unique in the storytelling aspect of it because no matter what is released, I think it just kind of resonates with different people. And I think with Force Awakens, it generated to all the old fans that were kind of maybe disenfranchised with how the original prequels were. And I think it really connected with everybody who, like you said, you grew up with Phantom Menace as your first Star Wars. And I think it really connected to you as like, okay, this is great. But then, wow, this is really hitting the point home. Like, why do I care about Star Wars? It's this movie.
Yeah, and I will say, it's like my complaint with Force Awakens is, overall, I want to say, don't get me wrong, I love the movie. It's great. I liked how they introduced all the characters, which, like I said, that's what they were trying to do. Really, for me, Force Awakens, I'm not the hugest fan of the third act because it is very much New Hope. Like, okay, guys, we got to take out this giant base that can destroy planets, and we're going to have to do a trench run in some X-Wings and shoot some proton torpedoes. That's just where I'm like, all right, well, okay, I don't really care for this.
But I think it succeeded in doing the one thing it needed to.
Yeah.
It recreated the magic.
Oh, yeah.
And doing that, I mean, if you're going to do a new trilogy and you're going to have it away from the George Lucas vision and to other directors' hands and ideas, you really got to make sure you nail it out of the park.
And again, I just want to say, I did like the movie. If anyone, despite what I just said about the third act, if anybody said, hey, you want to come over and watch Force Awakens, I'm like, all right, hold my beer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just resonates to where it stands in the movie franchise, where you have to consider it up in the echelons of trilogies and franchises. Mm-hmm. It's carved its own niche that I think other sci-fi and fantasy franchises are trying to copy. To a certain degree.
I mean, by and large, Star Wars created the term blockbuster.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because by and large, before Star Wars came out in 1977, people weren't lining up around the block for a movie.
The last one that did that was summer of 75, and that was Jaws. Right. And everyone was like, oh, nothing's going to top that. And then Star Wars came out, and everyone was like, oh, nothing's going to top that. And then Empire Strikes Back came out. And this is where it's, again, we said just how impactful that movie was. And this is the fun thing knowing from my dad. When he saw it in 1980, a lot of people hated the ending of it because back then sequels weren't as popular as they are today. Like, we know, okay, Force Awakens is the first one in a new trilogy.
Oh, yeah.
Empire Strikes Back came out and it ended. Everyone's like, is there going to be a third one? And no one knew because back then there wasn't the internet to say, okay, don't worry, we got a trilogy coming. People were like, well, is that it? Is Han are they ever going to rescue Han? Is he going to be stuck in carbonite? We just learned Darth Vader is Luke's father. What is this? How can you end like this?
And I think it was perfect for the time period of really establishing storytelling.
Oh, yeah.
And really, if you want to capture an audience and hold them in suspense until your next movie comes out, they did a stellar job with it.
No, yeah, it's one of those things, like, you look back when Mark Hamill has told the story of when he was promoting the original movie, he was going to conventions and basically having to convince anyone to stand around and listen to what the movie was about and him talk about it. It went from that to Return of the Jedi, where they're filming the movie under a secret title.
Yeah.
Where it's under such secrecy.
And then from all points in between, Star Wars carved its own niche in the movie franchise world, and then to see how it resonated into pop culture, we're going to talk about that next segment. Make sure to hit us up on the hashtag ODPHEE. We'll be right back.
Hey, I'm Mike Pappy from Rye Bread, and you're listening to the ODPH.
Coming back for the third segment on this week's Ocho Duro Parlay Hour Entertainment Edition, and we're talking all Star Wars. We've been talking about the movies, but there's been a few other projects that have came out under the Star Wars banner that kind of deserve a little notoriety here on the show. The comics have been spot on since they've been coming back to Marvel. And there's a couple of animated programs. I don't know if, Pat, I think you've heard of a couple.
Yeah, a couple animated programs that have been done. First one that came out was Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Now, you can find the entire run of this show on Netflix. It's 6 seasons. Highly recommend it, because if you're one of these people that you like the prequels, you enjoy the prequels, but you have issue with Anakin's quick turn to the dark side, I highly recommend you watch this series, because it really fleshes out why he is the way he is and the way he becomes, and sort of why he doesn't trust the Jedi so much.
And that's kind of interesting, too, because at least with the animated series, there is a little leeway to really dig into some stories, because you essentially have an unlimited budget. It's just your imagination and what you can animate on screen. And that really helps to kind of give a little backstories. There's maybe some side projects that have been going on. I know with Star Wars Rebels, that's been one. And why don't you break that down for us?
Yeah, so Star Wars Rebels is another animated show. The same crew and people who worked on Star Wars: The Clone Wars airs on Disney XD. Basically, it takes place before the original movie, and it's about a group of rebels, a small rebel cell, who is doing everything they can to fight the Empire. And it's the last half of the final season is coming up in 2018, they're really starting to tie it in. I know they just had I'm blanking on the guy's name, Forrest Whitaker. Thank you, Forrest Whitaker appear on the show as his character from Rogue One.
Really?
Yeah, they had Forrest Whitaker voice him.
I was going to say he showed up actually in season 3 also, right after the mid-season break, and that was after Rogue One had came out. Saw Gerrera came on Star Wars Rebels, and again, voiced by Forrest Whitaker. The idea is, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Pad, the show starts 5 years before the first movie, and it's supposed to end right before Rogue One.
They're getting really close. And the interesting thing if you're interested with the Saw Gerrera character from Rogue One and you want to learn a little bit more about him, watch the Clone Wars. That is where the character originated, and you see his origin story and kind of why he is the way he is in the Clone Wars.
And that's kind of a really nice footnote to the franchise and the characters created, because there's so many characters. If you think about it, over the course of now, what is it, 8 films going on to 9? Because if you count Rogue One as part of the trilogy,
I did
franchise rather.
I did. I counted Rogue One when I was when I'm doing a countdown of rewatching all the movies building up to Last Jedi.
No, yeah, it's 8 films. There's a lot of characters.
There's a lot of characters, and there's a lot of backstories that you can really get into if you really want to. And there's such a diverse group that you can really dig into some really unique stories.
And that's what makes Star Wars awesome, in the sense, like, with all these characters, like in the animated works, the movies, the comics, you can just find someone who you relate to in that universe. And that's what makes it really fun, is like, with having that many characters, it's very easy to find that one person that's like, you know what, I didn't really relate to Luke's character, but this person, Ezra Bridger from Rebels, I kind of get where he's coming from. I can relate to him a little more. And that's what makes a good series.
Absolutely. I mean, because you need characters that are going to resonate and connect with the fans in one way or another. That's the true success story of any show or any book or any story. Because if your fan base doesn't care about the characters, why bother doing it?
Yeah.
And I think that Star Wars production company for Rebels has really taken the time to really kind of create characters that are really resonating and really connecting with the fan base, because especially they're not really mentioned in the movies.
No, and that's kind of the interesting thing, and that's always been the interesting thing is, looking back to Star Wars: The Clone Wars, the big thing it introduced, and this made headlines in USA Today and in big publications online, it gave Anakin Skywalker a Padawan.
Yeah.
Which, if you watch Episode 2 and you watch Episode 3, you wouldn't know that. And that was the big shock, was, holy cow, he's in charge of someone.
And if you actually watch the Clone Wars and get to know who his Padawan is, Ahsoka Tano, when you start watching Rebels, then it leads to a really big moment in Season 2 with that Padawan.
No, yeah, and it was the thing, the character was voiced by Ashley Eckstein, who is, David Eckstein's wife. The ball player, yeah. So it was the excruciating thing for her for 5 years was, does your character die?
Yeah,
because she's not mentioned in Revenge of the Sith. She's not. You don't see her. So it was what happens to her.
And that's always kind of a unique thing too, especially if you're not in the movies. Like, your characters now take on a life of their own because your story is pretty much unwritten. And it just kind of goes as the next episode does. And that's always a fun thing to do. And I know with Rebels, the panels have always been good that we've gone to for Comic-Con down there.
Oh, yeah. The panel we went to at Comic-Con was great. Sarah Michelle Gellar was there, who's just a fantastic person. And, we got to see a couple episodes from Season 2, which was great. It was always just a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's very high energy in the room, and you can definitely tell the fan base was into it. And that's always something good you want to see because sometimes when they do side projects, they don't connect as well. And you don't want to lose your fan base. This is just kind of more, a thank you to them.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is we get side projects like that. You're like, okay, how are these people going to interact? And yeah, it's an animated work, but that still means people have to put all the emotion into their voices, which sometimes can be a lot harder than when they're acting. If you watch this cast of all these voice actors, when they're all together, you can really believe that they actually get along in real life, not just on screen. Because like the way they act around one another and how they talk when they're with each other, it adds something to the show to know, okay, yeah, these guys actually get along. You can actually makes the conversations more believable.
And there are a couple groupings of episodes from both of the two shows that I would argue are as good, if not better, than some of the movies.
Oh, yeah, I would definitely agree with
that.
Some
bold statements.
All
bold statements.
Mortis trilogy.
I was going to say the Mortis trilogy, and I was also going to go with the one person that everyone can mutually agree with, Phantom Menace, that was good, when Darth Maul returns.
Oh, yeah.
And again, because I think, in my opinion, he did not get enough screen time to really resonate. When he came on the screen, I thought he was going to be there for the first 3 movies, let alone what happened at the end of the first one, and he was kind of written off.
Okay, here's the thing you got to look at. Why do people not like the prequels? Well, part of it is the dialogue. Lucas had very on-point dialogue that really didn't leave a lot of acting for the actors to do. They just really spoke how they were supposed to be feeling. How many lines does Darth Maul have in Phantom Menace?
Oh, it's got to be 5 or less.
Yeah.
Yeah. He doesn't talk, and all he does is whips out a double-bladed lightsaber and is like, hey, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, let's dance, boys.
Yeah. And
plus the actor did all of his own stunts, so that just looks awesome in the final fight. Plus you got, again, John Williams' score, the Duel of the Fates playing in the background, which is just awesome.
The final fight is what sells you on Darth Maul, and that's why you kind of are left going, okay, this is awesome. Why is he already gone from the franchise?
Well,
Rebels decided to add him back in, which I think is great because I wanted to see a backstory with him. I'm sitting there going, okay, this guy he has the best lightsaber in all of history, and he's fighting your arguably 2 greatest Jedis at that time.
Well, and it's funny you say that if you want to know his backstory. Dark Horse Comics was the original writers for Star Wars comics in the recent years, before Disney bought Lucasfilms and Marvel took back over as the comic writer. There is one comic series from Dark Horse that is still canon. It's called Son of Dathomir, and it actually does explain a little bit about Darth Maul's origins and also what happens to him after the Clone Wars after he's come back. So I really think you'd like that if you want to know a little more about him.
Absolutely. I want to check that out. I mean, he's my second favorite Star Wars character behind Boba Fett.
Oh, I thought your favorite was Jar Jar Binks.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, now you obviously want to cause a fight on here because I am not Team Jar Jar. I know that his future, or actually what happened to him after the franchise was explained.
Yeah, so one of the books that came out, it was in the Chuck Wendig Aftermath series. It's a trilogy of books that take place after Return of the Jedi, and really the third book culminates in the fall of the Empire. Basically, there's one point where one of the characters goes to Naboo, and he's walking around the streets of the main palace city there, Theed, and there's a Gungan hanging out by a fountain there. Who is that Gungan? It's Jar Jar, and he is got face paint on. He's a clown. I'm not saying this in like a haha. He's legitimately like honk your nose, pull out balloons and make balloon animals. He's a clown because by and large, the galaxy blamed him for the rise of the Empire.
As they should.
Well, it is actually true if you look at it. If you watch Attack of the Clones, he's the one who gives Chancellor Palpatine supreme power, and then it's like, oh yeah, Chancellor Palpatine is the Emperor, and I will rule.
I just like to think Palpatine in the background of like he's trying real hard to like manipulate people and move the chess pieces into all the right places, and some of it's a struggle. He's having to wait.
And Jar Jar's that.
And then he gets Jar Jar, and he's like, oh, this was easy.
Well, no, I mean, I think it was such a House of Cards move to how Palpatine set him up, and he took full advantage of Jar Jar being very naive, and they completely took advantage of the character and to rightfully secure the Empire's power
I will say that is another thing the prequels do. Is out of the prequels, I do not like Attack of the Clones. It is probably my least favorite. I think it is awful. There's two things I like from it. Again, John Williams' score, and it really shows Palpatine's rise to Emperor. You get that first motion where, okay, he gets supreme executive power. He can make an army for the Republic. And then when you get to 3, you hear how he's been in term longer than he's supposed to be. He's getting more and more power, so there's less debating, less arguing. So when the Empire actually formed, you realize the people did this to themselves.
Well, yeah, because that's the thing they bring up is Obi-Wan brings up in the 3rd film. Oh, he's been in power for far longer than his term should have ended. If my math is correct, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, if my math is correct, he's been in power for 13 or 14 years.
No, that's it. After Phantom Menace, I believe there's a 10-year gap till Attack of the Clones, and then there's another 3 years of the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, though, is you still see that's a good conversation that I like with Anakin and Obi-Wan is Obi-Wan says his bit about him being in power and how he's going to get more executive power. Anakin is there, and he's like, well, that's a good thing. That means there's going to be less debating and we can actually get more stuff done. And Obi-Wan's just like, you do realize he's like way more powerful than he should be.
But that's the one thing about how the Empire set up their political agenda using Jar Jar. And really kind of, you take a look at how it's kind of almost influenced, so to speak, your TV shows, like House of Cards. I mean, it's a different story, obviously, but it's a different, obviously there's some elements in there as well that is, Star Wars is kind of taking on a life of its own.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see like how it's resonating into other forms of media, like we say, your TV shows, your other movies, your comics, which, I mean, have been done so well by Marvel and Dark Horse, respectively, that now going forward with it, the bar is set so high with expectations. We're hoping it hits, obviously, with Last Jedi and then Episode 9, whenever that is released.
Yep. I believe that's supposed to be 2019.
Yeah, yes.
I think it's supposed to be another 2 years.
Yeah.
Which again, lucky for us, we're not like the original trilogy and the prequels where we had to wait 3 years for these movies. So we're lucky. We only got 2, and we get a spin-off movie between each one.
Oh, we get a spin-off in 6 months.
Well, we get the spin-off, but plus we also have the comics that are coming out right now by Marvel. Braga, you've been reading them.
I was going to say, probably the best one that I would recommend by Marvel right now is I posted on the blog that there was a Vader run last year by
Karen Gillian.
Yeah, I can never pronounce the person's name, so thank you, Josh. And it was about Vader right after A New Hope. And I'm not going to go into details because it's on the blog, so if you want to know more, definitely look at the comic and read my review of it. But it's fun because it takes place right after New Hope, and that's where we see Vader at. There's a current one going on. It's Vader's origin story right after Revenge of the Sith. Yeah. So it's Vader establishing himself as Vader, and you see a lot of stuff from Rebels show up, like it shows the formation of the Inquisition, the history of the Inquisitors, and the biggest thing is you see Vader take his role of being a Dark Lord. He's no longer Anakin. Anakin is gone. He's got to prove, okay, I am a Sith Lord. I am going to be the Emperor's weapon against the Jedi.
And it's going to be really interesting to see how now that resonates with Kylo Ren going into the future. We've been talking about the comics. We've been talking about the animated shows. We've been talking about the books. Now it's time for us to talk about Last Jedi. And we're going to do that after we take a quick break here on the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour Entertainment Edition. We're now on iTunes. That's right. The Ocho Duro Parlay Hour is now on iTunes. So download, rate, and subscribe. Spread the word, and thank you for listening to the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour.
I'm the street light guiding you home. Avoid the wrong step into
Coming back on the ODPH Entertainment Edition, we've been talking Star Wars the entire time. Of course, the big movie coming out this week, The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
Going to go around the room. Ken, what are your thoughts and expectations for the movie?
My thoughts are I hope it is not a complete copy of Empire Strikes Back. I really want to see where they're going to go with the story with this. And I think that where they left off with The Force Awakens, with Kylo Ren kind of lurking in the background, Rey is meeting Luke Skywalker, who's been in isolation since who knows when. And I just really want to see a fun-filled action adventure, but I want to see some development, and I just want to see like maybe a curveball thrown here and there. And I also want to see Boba Fett. I'm not going to lie. I want to see Boba Fett on the screen.
No, the thing I think I can reassure you and everyone else is I know some people who've gone to see the movie already. I haven't had anything spoiled for me. I am avoiding all spoilers like I'm Neo in the Matrix.
I was going to say, before, not trying to cut you off, seriously, if you guys do not want this to be spoiled, be very careful about what you read comments-wise on Facebook, because even random posts that have nothing to do with Star Wars may or may not have a Star Wars spoiler thrown in there. That's how I got a spoiler thrown for me for Force Awakens, so be careful about that.
It's no joke. But I know some people who've gone to see the film, and I'm avoiding spoilers like Neo in the Matrix dodging bullets. It is not a rehash of Empire Strikes Back.
Good.
All right, that's good.
It's not a retelling, redone Empire Strikes Back, but from what I've heard and what I've read, it is amazing.
Yeah, I've seen some online reviews. I know IGN gave it a 9.7.
Which is insane.
Which I go to them a lot for my movie reviews when I like to go get some ideas of what to go see. And for high praise from them, obviously I'm digging. And most of everything I've read spoiler-free has just said that this is going to be the Star Wars movie. It's going to top Empire. So going in with that, I'm just really hoping it lives up to expectation, because I always hate going to a movie where you hear all the hype and then it just fizzles out.
There's already a lot of hype and a lot of expectations for this movie because, like we've said, it's a Star Wars movie. It is in a class in and of itself when it comes to expectations. But there's some added pressure and expectations for this movie because out of the blue, back in early part of November, Lucasfilm decided to drop the little tidbit that they were giving the director of this movie, Rian Johnson, his own trilogy that is going to start after Episode 9.
Now, is that in connection?
No.
I was going to say,
okay.
From what I read, and Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, Johnson's new trilogy is supposed to, he said it's going to go somewhere where Star Wars has never gone before. It's not supposed to tie in with the Skywalker family at all. Is that
true? So that's what, nothing's really known about it because I don't think he's even really started working on it. All that's known is the next trilogy will have nothing to do with the Skywalkers, nothing to do with Rey, Poe, Finn, Phasma, anything. It's going to be in some place they've never been before. So there's some added pressure to it because if this does really well, they're going to have some faith in him. If it doesn't do well, they might lose some faith.
I mean, here's my thing. This is my expectations. They're the same as yours, Ken. And like I said, my problems with Force Awakens was it did a good job. Again, it did a great job at establishing these new characters, this new generation of heroes. But it was a little bit like New Hope. Now that they've established this new timeline, like these new characters, I want to see something fresh now. I don't want to see an Empire rehash. And again, I've seen stuff. I've read a bunch of stuff online, spoiler free. It doesn't sound like that's the case. It really sounds like, okay, yeah, they got us back into the feel we like. Now we're going somewhere new. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. And I want to just I really don't have like expectations of what I want to see like with the characters. Now that I know it's supposedly not a rehash of Empire, I just want to see a fun Star Wars movie.
And this is going to be very bittersweet too, with Carrie Fisher passing during the taping.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like this is it. That is the one thing I have read. Supposedly they don't kill her off. They said after her passing, Johnson said, "No, we're not killing her off." That is what they agreed they were not going to do.
Yeah, well, I know that was one thing that people were obviously bringing up and questioning with when she passed. I know they said they will address it and they were figuring out what to do. I know the one thing they said they have not done is if you've seen Rogue One, they are not going to do like they did at the end of Rogue One where
and CGI
they thought about it, but they quickly squashed that idea. They're not going to CGI.
I thought that would have been poor taste if they did.
Yeah, no.
I was going to say it was one thing with Tarkin's actor. It's been 20-some years since he died.
Yeah, he
it's
died in like the mid-90s.
It's like okay, and again, since Rogue One was meant to be a prequel for New Hope, it worked for the movie. You had to address who Tarkin was if he was going to show up in New Hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, without question. I mean, like I said, it's going to be bittersweet because I mean, I'm super excited to see the movie, but I'm going to be very sad that this is going to be the last time we see Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia on the screen.
I got to say, my biggest thing though, I've said this before on the show, guys. Comic-Con, I got to meet Mark Hamill. That is probably the biggest thing I'm looking for in this movie is I get to go into that movie meeting one of my childhood, seeing my childhood icon back on the screen, knowing I've met him.
And he's actually going to say something this time.
Yeah, he's actually going to say...
I was going to say, we've already heard him say stuff in the trailers.
Yes.
So that's good. He's not just going to be mum the entire time.
Yeah, and that's going to be the thing, too. How Luke comes back and is now brought back into the fold of the story. Obviously, there's been some major changes going on since he's been away.
Yeah.
And kind of waiting to see why he's in exile and with the connection is going to be to Rey. Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of online speculation, but, I mean, it could be all for naught, too.
I was going to say, not trying to develop fan theories, I kind of think she has something to do with the Skywalker family in the sense she called Anakin's lightsaber to her over Kylo, or it could just simply be she's more powerful in the Force than Kylo, and I would be totally fine with that.
Yeah.
And I guess that is actually the other thing. I know I said don't really have a lot of expectations. This is the one thing, other thing I guess I want to see in the movie. I don't want to see Kylo get redeemed like Darth Vader did. I would actually, as much as this sounds really dark, I would really like it's like, okay, he's committed to the dark side, and he is going to be the end of him, or maybe it's the success for him. Who knows? But we already saw in Return of the Jedi when Vader, the ultimate badass, he redeemed himself. I don't want to see that again, and I think that's just it. I just don't want to see at this point any more rehashings of the original trilogy. I don't care if they throw Easter eggs in there to the original trilogy or the prequels. That's fine. I just don't want to see story aspects taken from the originals.
No, if you're going to redo the franchise and add parts to it like 7, 8, and 9, you need to take it in a different direction. Not saying full 180 and go...
Oh, no. I think
in a completely like unrelatable route.
Yeah.
But I think you're going to have to really make it stand out on its own, because if you just keep rehashing the ideas that were in A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, I mean, you're not really developing the franchise. You're just rehashing. And I don't think that works for it. I don't think Star Wars is meant to do that.
And that's just it. I just don't want to see that. And it just comes down to something new, something fun. No good Kylo Ren, get to see Luke, and I just want to have a fun time at the movies.
Absolutely. Pad, you are the biggest Star Wars fan in the room. What are you looking that's going to hit your benchmark there?
I'm kind of like with you guys. I want something fun. I want something to blow me away. I'm really intrigued to see what happens. I'm not even reading spoiler-free reviews. I'm blanket nothing. I don't want to know anything. I don't want to go into it. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm almost curious to see, I'm almost wondering, are they going to do anything with Force Ghosts? Because the one thing I want to bring up that I think is most interesting of all is Hayden Christensen making a return to the public at large, the Star Wars public at large, for the first time since 2005.
Oh, boy.
See, because by and large, for those who don't know, after the press was done for Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, Hayden's really not done much of anything, really nothing at all with Star Wars. And out of the blue, there is a large Star Wars convention that happens every year. It alternates if it's in the U.S. or abroad every year. But this past year, it was in Orlando. And who shows up for the first time in 12 years? Hayden Christensen.
Interesting.
Out of the blue. Now, he's not bashed it. He's not, said negative things about it. It's just, for those 12 years, he really had nothing to do with the franchise.
Well, it could also be, if you're in such an iconic role as he was, it could be a little overwhelming.
Also, that iconic role, depending on who you ask, wasn't positively received. I mean,
well, I think
there's a ton of stuff.
No matter how you draw that up, right?
That jokes. It's like,
it's going to be a tough act to follow after you're coming in to almost write a backstory for a character that's already been so well established. I mean, he was almost in a no-win situation to begin with.
Yeah.
However, he's coming into it, and I'm sure he wanted to distance himself from the franchise. Obviously, for a little bit, just to kind of get his bearings back. I mean, if you're having everybody watching and your expectation meter is through the roof,
yeah,
and it was kind of like you said, met with various criticism.
No, but I'm just kind of curious, why now?
That's a good point.
If he could have done it at any point. There's been 12 years. He's had 12 years to, say something, do something, what have you. But to do it now, and then to not only have it happen now, but get photographed with Mark Hamill.
Well,
it just seems a little, and I mean be reading a lot into nothing. The timing just seems odd to me.
I mean, you could be right. I'm not trying to shoot down your idea. Like, I don't want you to think that.
No.
It could also very well be that was the 40th anniversary of Star Wars. Maybe
Right.
he thought, okay, maybe I can show up for this. It'd be a big thing.
yeah, quite possibly. I mean, I could see them doing that, and I could also see him coming in now that everybody has kind of, this is the new franchise era of Star Wars with new characters, and the expectation meter maybe not so much on him.
No, I don't think so. I think it'd be great if he is in the movie, and I don't know if he is. I don't know if he's not. I think if the Force Ghost of Anakin Skywalker as Hayden Christensen shows up, that'd be a great callback to the prequels.
Oh, I think that'd be brilliant. If
I mean,
they
I
did
would
that.
be okay with that.
Because you think back to the Force Awakens where Kylo is looking at the burned helmet of Darth Vader and saying, "I will finish what you've started." If in some way, shape, or form Anakin Skywalker shows up as a Force Ghost, I think it'd be a great callback.
That would be something.
And it'd be even cool if he maybe comes back and he talks to Ben, like trying to talk him out of the path he's going. Like, that would be pretty neat. Like, if Ben sees him, not necessarily Luke. It's like Ben is the one who talks to him.
That would be a very unique take. I kind of now want to see that now.
Yeah, it's just the timing of it is just really bizarre to me.
Well, like I say, it could be different factors. And
Yeah.
like I said, I think, but honestly, I think it's back to it's the 40th anniversary, and he
Yeah.
is a part of it. And,
yeah.
he should be proud of it.
And I was going to say, I wasn't trying to slam him early with, like, the expectation stuff. If you watch Revenge of the Sith, I mean, I really one of the reasons I love that movie is I do like Hayden Christensen's performance when he turns to the dark side. It's like he does a great job at showing it's like this is Darth Vader. Like
Yeah.
he's just going through the Jedi Temple killing younglings, and then when he takes on he kills the Separatist leaders. It's like you really believe it's like, okay, I'm watching Darth Vader right now.
Oh my God, that scene where the kids, what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
Oh Lord.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to say
which
missed opportunity with that scene. How awesome would it have been if he turns his lightsaber on and it had been a red lightsaber?
that would have only added to the factor. I mean, but I think that whole scene that's when you knew he was fully going to the dark side. And I think Hayden finally got to really get into his role because I think he really wanted to make sure that you knew that, hey, this is not the friendly Anakin Skywalker. This is the heir apparent to the Empire and the dark side. And I think that moment, that is his moment to really kind of let loose. And as you see, I mean, there's so much of a character shift after. I mean, kudos to him for that. I mean, that's for me. That's what stands out to me with him being Darth Vader.
Yeah, no, the whole turn from when he goes to Darth Vader is easily his best performance in the entire
Definitely.
two films.
Oh yeah, without question.
Incredible.
Without question.
And I really gotta say, when we're talking about the prequels, and yes, we've said some stuff about them, I do want to say I think we should take a moment and really appreciate like the amount of the amazing world that George Lucas created. Say what you will about the prequels but the original and how he didn't really involve himself as much with the other two films in the original trilogy. This is all his. The first six movies, they're all his. Like this only exists. Even these new ones, they only exist because of his vision and how he didn't give up.
And how crazy is it that you just think such a spectacle that is Star Wars just came from one person and just let it go.
Yep.
And just put his imagination to work, and just like I said, he let it go, and look how far his imagination took him.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
And that's where it's like, you know what? Even if you don't like the prequels, it's like, you know what? He had a dream and he stuck with it. Yeah. And that's something everyone should live by.
No, I think you have to give it to Lucas for sticking to his vision and not compromising under any circumstance. No. And the proof is right there. I mean, look at how his movies have interacted with young fans, old fans, and they still resonate. They're bridging people together of different fan bases. And now it's just who isn't affected by Star Wars? Who is not excited for this movie?
Yeah, well, I am.
Absolutely. I mean,
I can't think of anybody. I mean, come on. It's like everyone's like, all right, we're going to go see, when are you going to go see Star Wars? It's like, well, I'm going to go on premiere night. When are you guys seeing it?
Yeah, and I think that is going to be the movie. I mean, it's going to shatter all types of records.
Oh, it was already going to break records, but I think with it being Carrie Fisher's last film, that is only going to add to it.
Yeah, and like I said, rest in peace to her.
I was going to say, rest in peace, Carrie.
Yeah,
we all miss you.
It's like I said, it's going to be bittersweet because I'm excited to see the movie, but it's going to be like, man, this is going to be the last time we see her on screen as Princess Leia, and that's just, man, it sucks.
Yeah.
No other way to put it. But let us know what your thoughts are on Last Jedi when it comes out. We want to know what you think. hashtag ODPHEE for the entertainment edition. So on behalf of Bright Guy Signal, the Padawan J, who you'll be seeing at many showings this weekend with his lightsaber.
Oh, yeah.
And representing the Force as only he can. I am your host, Ken M. We want to thank you for listening to another edition of the ODPH Entertainment Edition.
May the Force be with you.